Hi guys, it's me George, and today I'm going to be doing a video about how we move forward within our practice from the manuals, okay? So a lot of the times now I have noticed and I've seen that there are a lot of people that kind of feel a bit stuck in terms of they have read all the how-to manuals and at this point they kind of feel a bit stuck, like they can't move forward than where they are now. And I think that I think that's really important to notice because I've been there myself. So I feel like this video is really important, even though it's taken me about 20,000 fucking times to do. But I do feel like it's important to do. Now, you have to bear in mind these authors, very well respected and rightfully so. By what they're doing, they are making folk magic and folkloric witchcraft more accessible to the public. And by doing that, you help preserve a tradition. And so that to me, I feel is very important. And I feel it's, to me, I have a lot of respect for people that do that. And one of the things I think a lot of people do is they tend to forget that these authors are also human. If you put it more into context, the views I had generally from 10 years ago are very, very different to the views I have now. So naturally in practice, the practice I had 10 years ago, very different from the practice I had now, and rightfully so. We need to learn, we need to grow, we need to develop. And so, please bear that in mind with these books. Whenever the author had written these books, they will be at a different point now from where they was when they wrote these books. So bear that in mind, and see it as an example that actually we all move, we all adapt, we all grow, we all develop. And that's one of the things I want to say here. Don't take these books as gospel. Don't take them as fundamental. They're not Bibles. Even the Bible, in my personal opinion, shouldn't be taken fundamental because all sorts of horrible shit enables and happens. And not enables, endures even, sorry. And so with all this in mind, I think the best books, that we will have on the topics of traditional witchcraft, magic, look at the back of these books. There is a reason why we have references in books is because we can see where the author got these informations from, what pieces of information. So if there's, folk tales, there's a book on folklore, look at that book of folklore. Maybe it might give you some pieces of information that the author hasn't actually put in the book that you might find relatable to your own practice. Maybe it might help you understand the spirit world in a more clearer, for want of a better word, way. And, from that point, maybe if you're talking about witchcraft, in terms of the aspect of folkloric witchcraft, look at the lore around you, look at the folklore around you. And, even at that point, if you're thinking about the way of the witch, look at folklore in other places about witchcraft and see, maybe it might be other places that has ties to your land that you live in. So for instance, for me, I've read a while back, but The Silver Bullet and Other American Witch Stories, compiled by Hubert J. Davis, which is a fantastic book. And there was actually things that I read in that book that I was like, we have that, that's actually a thing we do, which was kind of cool. And I was like, oh my God, I love this idea. And, there are some ideas from folklore and folk tales that I have actually utilized myself within my own practice. And so I encourage people to do that. And I think that's really important, to look at the lore of the witch from around your area or maybe other lands that might have ties with your area. The other part of it is the references in terms of the folk charms and spells. Now, if you look at sort of where these authors get information from, a lot of the time, not all the time, but a lot of the time, cunning folk, witches, got spells and incantations, charms from various books or grimoires, books of magic. So for instance, in 1801, there was a book published called The Magus by Francis Barrett. And we know that James Cunning Mural, the Cunning Man of Hadley, or also known as Cunning Mural, copied bits of this book into his magic book. In fact, we have very little scraps left of that book, but that's one of the sort of famous sort of images out of his book is a copy from The Magus by Francis Barrett. For instance, there have been charms and spells used from books such as Carmina Gadelica, by Alexander Carmichael, who, spells and incantations from the Western Isles of Scotland in 1900s, in 1900 even. There are various different books of magic that have existed throughout time that we can look back on, and a lot of the time these books can be free. Like a lot of these books, Carmina Gadelica, the Magus, you can find them on sacred texts online, and these books are accessible to us, and we can work them and we can utilize them. So please, in terms of folk spells and charms, look more down. Dig deeper and look into these books that were being used. There are books that have come out, that are the Grimoire of Arthur Gauntlet, Sloane MS 3851, or the Cunning Man's Handbook as well, that's just come out. In terms of cunning folk practice, whether or not you see them as different from the practice of the witch or the same thing, different subject for a different video. But, you can have a look at that and see if you can utilize that within your own practice. And I think that's something that's really, really important. The other thing is that there are books now that are out of old charms and old spells. So for instance, the British Book of Charms and Spells by Graham King, which is an absolutely phenomenal book of traditional folk magic, of British folk magic, and there are some sort of spells and charms in this book that are so interesting, and it talks about various aspects such as the use of witch marks or ritual witch marks to ward away evil, or sort of reduction magic, or so sort of old written charms. So many different parts of folk magic in these books, so packed with so much information. A fantastic book. We have books like The Wicked Shall Decay, Charms, Spells and Witchcraft of Old Britain by Andrew D. Mercer. Again, a fantastic book full of so much information and spells in this book that I haven't actually seen before. These books allow us to actively take from them, whether or not we want to make sure we want to keep the actual charm itself intact and use it as it is, or whether or not we want to take from it and adapt it to suit our particular situation. And like I said in my talk at the Nameless Art, there is nothing wrong with adapting these old pieces of folk magic to suit the time period we're in now. In my view, there's no point doing these old folk spells and folk charms when they're not relatable to us. You can tell these old folk spells and charms were recorded in the environment that they was around at the time, and that's the point. To me, make sure it's relevant to you and keep it relevant to you. There's no point doing an old folk spell when, it's talking about things that aren't in your era, that are no longer used. Adapt them. Know where they're from, know where the references come from, but adapt them. And last but not least, one of the things is write things down. People don't write things down enough in this day and age. They really don't. And writing, the art of writing, is becoming a very lost art, which is really sad. But there are so many spells and charms. Look online, look at sacred texts, and just like the cunning man of old, copy it down in terms of your own practice. I have pieces from the Carmina Gadelica here. I have pieces from Francis Barrett's The Magus. But again, I carry this about with me. This is a book of remedies, folk charms that I can apply in my day-to-day life, and I have done in work before. I've used it on someone that had some pain. I've used it in other charms. There are charms for thieves in here. There are charms that are relatable, travel charms, things like that. And I think writing stuff down, having that knowledge there with you, carried with you, helps preserve these old folk charms. I've babbled on, but I hope this video has helped, and I hope it unsticks people in a sense. Over and out. Peace.